have you ever seen a standard or attempt to create a widely accepted standard propagate so fast? We're talking half a year. And there is hardly a company right now that a public-facing, software vendor that doesn't have MCP something. It might be good, it might be bad, doesn't matter, right? There is no agent that doesn't use it. Nothing ever propagated that fast. No standard became a standard used by everybody that fast.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 321. Model Context Protocol for Standardizing AI Tool Integration. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. So in starting out with AI coding, one of the things you'll probably hear about pretty early on is something called an MCP. Victor, what is an MCP?
Model Context Protocol. It's a way how agents, after receiving instructions from models what to do, can accomplish that something by talking to tools or APIs or what's not, right? The idea is essentially to create a standard protocol, right? So think of it like API for agents. Agents can use APIs and CLIs and so on and so forth, right? But even though they can do that, it's in a way API for agents, yeah.
So everything that you were just talking about, to me, we're talking about MCP itself, Model Context Protocol. That's the spec. You have MCP servers. But to me, MCP servers are nothing more than sort of a backend server that we interact with, right? Think about it if you had a decoupled client server type setup, that's what it is. It's just what it does.
If I keep the analogy of APIs, think of it as actually, okay, API spec is not the real thing. You need actual API with probably some backend that serves that API. That's what MCP server is, right? It's the implementation of that spec. Now, that server can be as simple as I get something from the agent and I forward it somewhere else. Or it can be, no. Actually, I get something from the agent and then I do something, right? It could be sending requests, just transforming and forwarding those requests from the agent to, let's say, Kubernetes, kube control get. Or it could be processing information and doing something without going anywhere out of itself, right? Just as the API, you don't know what the backend behind the API is doing. It could be sending to some other backend or doing the actual work.
Right. It could be off to a third-party API behind itself, going to a local database, or just doing local work. It could be anything.
Exactly. It could be literally anything.
Except from a Model Context Protocol spec perspective, there are tools, there are prompts, there are, I think, one or two other things, correct? Those are the two big ones to me.
Yeah. So tools are what is most commonly used, and there are prompts. That is a way how to essentially share prompts to the agent, right? So it just returns prompts in the same. So instead of agent reading it from a directory, like Cloud Code would read it from .cloud/commands, if you implement prompts in your MCP, that MCP is serving prompts to the agent, right? But the main one, there are a few others, I don't even remember them, to be honest. The main one is tools, really. The most important thing about, and this is where things get slightly different. or complicated, not complicated, different, right? The most important thing about any tool in an MCP is the description. That's everything. The description is everything. It's in English, kind of, hey, use me if you feel like performing any operations related to Kubernetes. Now, that does not guarantee that agent will use you for anything related to Kubernetes. It's not forced. It's not enforced, right? It's just a suggestion to the agent. And when I say agent in this context, I mean to the agent context that is sent to the model that decides what to do. It's a suggestion, kind of. I'm here. You can use me. You don't have to. Your choice. And the reason why you might use me is English, right?
Why did this even come about? What was the purpose of MCP? I mean, we've talked about there's tools, there's prompts. It gives you a centralized way of doing things, but why did it need to come into existence?
It needed to come to existence to enrich the context so that model can make a decision how to do something. Because if you say, I'm going to stick with Kubernetes, right? If you type there, I want to retrieve all the resources from my Kubernetes cluster, right? That's a context. Your intent is a context. Agent sends it to the model, and model based on that sends back instructions to the agent what to do. And those instructions could be execute kube control, right? Or use curl, or whatever, right? With MCPs, you're extending that context. Those descriptions I mentioned before, right? So those descriptions become part of the context. So when you type retrieve all the resources from Kubernetes, that is sent together with all those descriptions of different tools to the model, and model now has more information that it can use to make a decision what the agent should do. Agents don't think. They're just getting a plan of action from models. So it is a way how to enrich that, right? Because if you say without, let's say something more complicated, right? Let's say AWS, right? You say, I want to create an EC2 instance in AWS, and there is no MCP, right? There are probably 5,000 different ways or suggestions a model could send back to the agent what to do in that case. Oh, you want to do something in AWS? Create a Terraform module. You ask it again and it says, how about AWS CLI? And you send it again, the same. And then you clear the context, send again. And it will suggest, oh, maybe you should do this, right? With MCP, you're enriching that context. Basically, you're saying, this is how we talk to AWS in that example, right?
Because it could be left up to its own devices. The model will just tell you whatever's at top of mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's correct or not.
It's not necessarily whether it's correct or no. Of course, that is as well. But whether it is within your context. And in this case, when I say context, I don't mean the agent context, but context of you, your project, your organization, and so on and so forth, right? In context of your organization, you can say we are using Crossplane. But if that context is not propagated to the model, what's CloudFormation, right? I feel like CloudFormation today.
Another word that you used was intent. Intent is a big thing in general in dealing with any kind of AI coding that I've learned.
Yeah.
What your example that you just said there is like, hey, we use Crossplane. If the whole thing that you're doing doesn't understand we use Crossplane, and you're saying, give me an EC2 instance, like you were saying, I think probably it would give you CloudFormation probably 90% of the time, Terraform probably 8% of the time, and you might hope to see Crossplane maybe 1%.
Exactly.
Just because of the vast amount of documentation around each of those tools. And
correct.
I'm wanting to do something inside of AWS. Well, you're wanting to do something in AWS. Well, you must want to use CloudFormation, right? Yeah. Just by default. It's like you ask me, if you were to ask an AWS system engineer, Give me an EC2 instance. What tool do you think they're going to use?
It could be any, but it will be whichever they already decided before you ask them. That's that context. Or maybe they haven't decided anything. Maybe that decision was made even before that person joined the company, right? That would be that context, right? Intent would be give me the EC2 instance, right? Context is everything else. It's, hey, in our company, we always use Crossplane. That's what we do, right? And that engineer knows that, has that context in his or her head, right? Oh, yeah, you asked for EC2, cool. Let me do this and that. Models don't know that. They know what other people are doing, but not what you're doing in your company.
It seems like sometimes we would say, I don't really care what tool is used. And sometimes that may be true. But in other times it may not be.
Yes. Now we're entering into the whole context engineering or whatever would be called, that maybe you're using nothing. But in that case, you would still not say, give me EC2 instance. Then you would say, you know what? We're just starting for the first time with AWS. What are the options I have available with me, right? For me, right? You would be talking to it. You would be brainstorming, and you would come to conclusion eventually to use X or Y or Z, whatever that is, right? Based on that conversation, back and forth, back and forth. Think of it like, in that case, that would be, AI would be equivalent of a consultant, right? Consultant came to your company saying, oh, okay, I heard, guys, that you need me because you're just starting with AWS today. How can I help? And then the person would say, let's start with EC2 instance, right? And then that consultant, and this is now where things start depending in case of consultants, but I think that it applies the same to AI, depends on seniority or maturity, right? If I use my as example, and I was that consultant, like, I'm now throwing random numbers here more or less, but let's say 25 years ago, you say, give me the EC2 instance, I say, no problem. Give me 15 minutes. And I would come back with EC2 instance. I would do it with Terraform or CloudFormation or whatever. I would jump straight into fulfilling your desires, right? Now, consultant, not 25 years ago, but let's say 15 years ago would be, wait, we're going to have a full day of conversation until I fully understand what the heck are you guys doing. Then after that full day, and maybe a couple of rounds in a bar afterwards, we would come to some conclusion and do something, right? I'm not sure how this ties to MCP and why are we talking about this anymore, but somehow we got here.
Well, it's an interesting correlation between an MCP server and a consultant. Because if it's tooled correctly, it could be a good consultant. So let me play it out. Let's say you're not using an MCP server at all. And this is going to be a very bad example.
Yeah.
But I think it's, now, by the way, 25 years ago for EC2 wouldn't have mathed. 18 years ago is the math on that.
Yeah.
So if 18 years ago, and we had AI, I would say, give me an EC2 instance. And that's all I said. No MCP server, no nothing. Just asking a model. What would I get? I'd probably get a T1 micro because there's probably a little bit of knowledge like, hey, let's not waste their money. Or it could have gotten the exact opposite and gotten the most expensive instance. It could have been anything. Now, fast forward, 10 years from that, there's patterns built up. Terraform's come into existence. Crossplane has come into existence. CloudFormation is now in existence.
Still, the point is that AI today is that young version of me. It tries very, very hard to please. And it's doing that by not asking too many questions. If you now ask AI, give me EC2 instance, and you're asking that from an empty project, let's say, so that it cannot deduce from your existing patterns what's or not, it would most likely not ask you anything. It would just output AWS CLI commands. Or maybe Terraform, or whatever, right? It goes straight, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it goes straight into fulfilling your intent. And your intent is give me EC2 instance. And it's up to you, and that's as it is right now. We cannot change that unless you or me switch jobs and join Anthropic or Google or whatever, right? So that means that you need to fix that stuff on your end. You need to start having conversations, kind of your intent, or let's put it this way. AI will give you the most likely good outcome based on what you asked. And if you ask silly questions like, give me EC2 instance, without asking what would be the potential solutions, what are the pros, what are the cons. If you just ask, give me EC2 instance, it pleases you immediately. Here's EC2 instance.
I get it, but that's the model just raw. If we were to introduce an MCP server that has been trained in how to do things, that's where the difference comes into play.
Exactly, because then the context that model gets is not only give me EC2 instance. And in this context, I'm ignoring the system prompt of your agent and stuff like that, right? It's not only give me EC2 instance, but it's also when working with AWS, send requests in this format with those fields to this MCP. So your context now is different. And the response from the model is different because it received different information. You think you sent only give me EC2 instance. But what you really sent is that plus the augmented context from the descriptions of the tools in that MCP. So MCP, from that perspective, is in a way, and that's definitely not the only thing, and there are many other things missing. It's in a way, it's sort of a way to train models of what to do under certain conditions. Not enforce it, just to be clear, but suggest.
I think the word there, train, is not the right word. I think suggest is the more correct word, because here's why. You're using the same MCP server that I'm using. So if that agent, not the MCP server, but the agent, has my context, you have your context, right? You have your agent, I have my agent. Those agents are running within our unique context. But if we offload it to the MCP server to take care of things, remember, we said the MCP server can actually do things for us as well.
Yeah.
So if we actually offload it to the MCP server, whose context does it have now? Because you want it to have full admin to actually get things done, because I probably don't have full admin locally in my context. You probably don't have full admin.
Yes.
But then the problem is, if it's doing it full admin, that's great, things can get done, but it's not doing it on my behalf, it's doing it as itself. This whole security thing is the crazy part of this.
That greatly depends on where that MCP is running, right? For most people, MCP is running next to the agent on their laptop. It cannot imagine permissions. That MCP's permissions are the same permissions as your permissions on that laptop, right? If I use kubectl as example, so Kubernetes as example, yeah, it's going to use the current kubeconfig context, right? And whatever I can do, it can do, and vice versa. When it becomes more interesting is when companies start running MCPs remotely and telling me to connect my agent on my laptop to that MCP server. Then we enter into a situation where multiple people are hitting the same MCP server. That MCP server needs to have very elevated permissions because it needs to serve the needs of many different people. And this is the part of the story where I don't think that we have a solution yet. Right? How to distinguish different users, how to authenticate, and so on and so forth.
Right, because as of today, as we're recording this in August of 2025, in the MCP spec, there is no concept of authentication or authorization.
It's even worse than that. Here's an example. I haven't found a decent way to run it in Kubernetes.
What does that mean?
It means that I haven't found a decent way to run it in Kubernetes, right? So if we talk about running it remotely, what's the most natural place where I would run it as a company, right?
For you, you'd run it in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly. But then kind of Kubernetes, most MCP servers are talking through STDIO, not HTTP.
Most. You're correct. Most are not.
I'm not saying all, most, right? STDIO. All of a sudden you have complications. Okay, so you cannot use Ingress, right? Because there's HTTP. You cannot use this. You cannot do that. You need some kind of a bridge that will convert HTTP requests into STDIO and STDIO into HTTP requests. We have so many unsolved problems. Right now, I only can rely on MCP servers running locally, honestly, or running remotely but through third parties. Like I think that GitHub does not even offer anymore the option to run MCP locally. It's remotely, it's controlled by them. Nobody knows how it's running, why it's running, but it works.
Doesn't that just make you feel nice and warm and fuzzy?
I don't use it, so I don't know how I would feel. That's a separate discussion. I think that like MCPs like GitHub are useless, right?
But it's interesting because that's actually the correct model. See, we've reused words so many different ways here. That is the correct way to interact with the MCP server. Standard I/O is not the correct way, in my opinion. It's fine for small things, but if I'm a large organization, I don't want to have to keep that MCP server updated on everybody's local machines.
No. What I'm rather trying to say is not that. I'm trying to say that, there is a lot of pending work. MCPs are a new thing, right? They appeared yesterday. And there are no standard ways how to run them remotely. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's definitely I mentioned Kubernetes. There is stack log. It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Nobody knows. We need a bit of time. It's not that STDIO is better or worst option. That will be a separate discussion. It's just that we don't have standard ways to do those things because those things appeared yesterday, like MCP. It all started from Anthropic that says, hey, here's a standard protocol. Cool. Here are a few examples that we run in Docker containers locally for us, and Docker containers are actually the better option. Most people say, no, I'm going to run it as MPX directly on my machine. But, it's only a few months past, half a year.
And it's going to keep changing, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we're in the right direction. What do you think some of the real pros are? We've talked around some things, but let's sort of hone in on this. What are the real pros of having an MCP server to help you do your work within your agent that you're using?
The real pros are when they're specialized. I mentioned before GitHub. I don't need MCP for GitHub. GH CLI works perfectly well, right? And model knows perfectly well GH CLI, right? It's a commonly used tool. It knows the whole internet. It knows exactly what to do with it. It works well. I don't need anything else. Now, I'm in this context, I'm talking about MCPs running locally, just to be clear. Now, Kubernetes, it knows how to use kube control. Why do I need MCP for that, right? What I do need MCPs is when they do more than mirror known tools and APIs one-to-one. So if you would say, let me stick with Kubernetes, you would say, hey, you have the knowledge how to run an application there, maybe knowledge based on my company policies. And I use that MCP that will not just invoke kube control, blah, 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 but will assemble it in a certain way that works for us and what's not. If it would have additional logic than only kube control, then it becomes something very useful. And the way I tend to describe the pattern that I feel we should be following with MCPs is that if MCPs are architected or designed around intents, my intent is not to execute kube control get. Or my intent is not to execute kube control apply. My intent is I want to deploy an application. I want to see what the heck is going on in my cluster, right? Something that is more focused on what we normally ask for than replication of the tools that already work pretty well and which agents can use perfectly well. I would even go as far as that, and I did those experiments. Like your agent will statistically is more likely to do the right job or right set of tasks in your GitHub repository with GH than with GitHub MCP, and because it knows it better. But if you say, let's say that I stick with GitHub, right? If you would say, end of development, I finished developing, right? That would be my intent. And then that would be sent to an MCP that would push all the changes that are not pushed, merge the pull request, create a pull request, wait for reviews, if there are any in that pull request, wait for CI pipelines to finish executing, evaluate those outputs, and then merge the pull request back. Then we're talking about something that is very useful, that goes way beyond the capabilities of a CLI.
I think one of the pros, and this is specifically for remote MCP servers, it might work with the standard IOs, is let's say today you're using Claude Code or you're using Cursor. And then the next big thing comes out, and now you're ready to move to the other thing. If you had it locally, that standard IO may not work with the new agent because of whatever weird bindings or whatever. It could be anything. It may be fine, but it may not be. Whereas with an HTTP-based remote MCP server, that's probably going to be fine no matter which agent you use. Is that reasonably true?
I see it slightly differently. To me, that is not really the question whether it's this specific protocol or that specific protocol within MCP protocol, right? Or transport mechanism. Those are, technical details that we can now discuss what is more effective, what is better, and so on and so forth. What is the most important thing in this case is that we all rallied around one protocol. It's similar like what's the OpenTelemetry, right? Now we can discuss whether OpenTelemetry is better or worse than this and that. But that's not the most important discussion. The most important discussion is that everybody talks OpenTelemetry. Even if you find me a better way to do XYZ than with OpenTelemetry, I'm still going to get more value with OpenTelemetry simply because I know that my tools and your tools and his tools and their tools are all designed or updated to talk that protocol. And that's the real value of MCP. There were many other attempts. I don't even remember their names. That's how important they are. This is the one for some reason or another sticks. And absolutely almost every agent talks MCP right now. Almost every company that wants other agents to talk to them, their software, published MCPs, and so on and so forth. So it's a protocol that everybody adopted. That's what really, really matters there.
What are some of the cons of MCP? Still too young? Is that really? I don't think that's a con. I mean, it's just fine, right? I mean,
there are many things missing. I can tell you the thing that I was missing the most, and I'm not missing. Now I'm still missing it, but now it's in a spec, but nobody yet implemented it, or very few, and that's synchronous conversation. The way how it works normally MCP, without that new addition to the spec, is agent sends something to MCP, MCP responds back, and that's it. It's like HTTP. What I'm missing is, wait. Kind of, if I send you another request, you just forgot everything we spoke, right? Unless my MCP has a stateful storage and so on and so forth. Now there is ability to actually talk back and forth within the same session, let's say, until both parties agree, okay, now we're done. And that simplifies greatly the design of MCPs because like the one I'm building right now, I need to create some session IDs and store stuff into JSON files so that if another request comes related to that same thing, and I can retrieve the previous state and context and what's or not, and then continue where we left. That was very painful, but that's now solved. The only thing missing is for Claude Code, Cursor, and others to implement it. I think that VS Code has it only right now.
So again, it's new. So not everything is there yet. We're waiting on the agents to catch up to implement all those new features, or not necessarily new features, but the spec features that are really coming to use.
That's where power of the people comes in. Like we mentioned earlier, how MCPs can serve prompts. I think it's one of the simplest and most useful features because it's very simple to implement. It's very useful. Works almost exclusively in Cloud Code, at least since a couple of weeks ago, last time I checked. And then I went to Cursor and kind of, okay, there are issues opened by people. Where is this? We want this. And then I went to some other agents and none of them implemented it. Give it a couple of more weeks and everybody will have it.
I have to admit, I like having prompts in my MCP server, especially for things that I'm doing over and over and over again.
Now think about it on a company level, right? Kind of that those prompts are really our internal processes. They should be shared by everybody on all projects and what's not.
They're effectively a run book, a standard process document. What are those called? Typically I don't even remember anymore. But all those things, and you just don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And guess what? When the process changes, somebody goes and makes the update in one place and everybody gets it. A few caveats, but everybody gets it.
Everybody gets it when they
restart
their agent, yes.
Yeah. That's the only trade-off. But most people, I probably would think, I would hope. I think this is the one tool out of everything we've used in the past few years, you want to restart it every day. You really want to restart your agent every day.
Yeah.
For numbers of reasons, but that's yet another one. Context being the context window being your primary one. That's a different conversation for today, though.
Going back to what we talked, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a or attempt to create a widely accepted standard propagate so fast? We're talking half a year. And there is hardly a company right now that a public-facing, software vendor that doesn't have MCP something. It might be good, it might be bad, doesn't matter, right? There is no agent that doesn't use it. Nothing ever propagated that fast. No standard became a standard used by everybody that fast.
Yeah, OpenTelemetry took years.
Years.
And MCP, well, that's comparing apples and oranges because they're not so much that they're different, but OpenTelemetry is huge, whereas MCP is actually fairly well scoped.
Fair enough. Different scopes and many reasons why it should go faster or slower. I'm more alluding that simply things are moving so much faster than before, just as before they were moving faster than before that, right? Big or small, I never saw it propagate that fast.
I guess the wrap up on this is MCP servers are good until they're not. They can be really good for you, especially in a prompt scenario, useful for tools, for things that are maybe you've written a tool inside your company that the models have no idea about. An MCP server is going to help you tremendously in that. I mean, think about all the little command line things you've written.
Exactly. And that's so much. What you just said is out of the box better use of MCP than, let's say, GitHub. Right? Because models know GitHub. They don't know your stuff. You can wrap even if you don't go crazy, you can wrap your processes. You can create workflows in MCPs, right? Because MCP agent sends a request to the MCP and MCP responds back. Now think of this. What if MCP responds back to the agent saying, do this and that, and when you're finished, come back to me with this information. That now circle becomes a workflow. Do this, come back to me with this information, and then I'm going to come back to you with second set of instructions, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, right? Until we're done.
That is your process. So you can create that whole workflow and just keep going.
You can call that MCP start work.
Yes. Well, actually, you create a prompt that would fire off that process that would go, right?
Yeah. You can do it with prompts. The advantage of MCP is that prompts are always executed on demand. So you do / or @ prompt and this and that happens, right? MCPs are extending context sent to models, and so that models make decision what to do, right? So if you, let's say that you say / I'm done, then that starts, that executes a prompt that creates a pull request, whatever you've done, right? Now, if you do the same thing in MCP, it can provide instructions to the agent. Okay, whenever you see that the task that somebody is working on is finished, call me. So you don't have to do /done or @done or whatever, right? You don't have to necessarily rely on will I forget or not. Now you're relying whether model will forget or not, right?
Well, this gets us back to the initial example. Give me an EC2 instance. With your MCP server that you've written, but you've written in the company, that's like, okay, who's making this request? Let's assume that has being passed along with the request. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, that's Victor. Victor works for Pam. Pam reports into engineering. This is working on this project, so let's open up a ticket for this. Okay, here's the ticket. And all that stuff just magically happens until finally you've got your EC2 instance, but all the paperwork, because you've written it in the process, is done.
Here's even better version that I was alluding to before. You know, when I was saying inexperienced consultant, I just do. That MCP that you did, when you say give me EC2 instance, can evaluate that intent and says, Darin, that's not enough. Can just come back to you immediately. With instructions to the agent, 2 instructions. Ask Darin follow-up questions. Right, whatever, which region you want, blah, blah, blah. Ask him these questions, and then call me again with the answers to those questions. Because then you control the flow, right? Assuming that's your MCP that you designed and so on and so forth. You can control the flow. You can decide what is enough, what is not enough, what is missing, what goes after what, and so on and so forth. You're effectively creating workflows. While with models, you are in free flow.
And when I answer back with, what's a region? The response will be, call somebody who knows something. That's what your response would be.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What if that MCP, and I'm going to stick with give me EC2 instance. What if that MCP has an agent connected to a model baked in? And then MCP receives that request, passes it to the agent with instruction, okay, I got this intent from Darin. Is that enough? Do you have all the information? Because when you went directly to a model, you never said, give me EC2 instance, do you have all the information? Right? You never said that. That was your mistake. But since you control the flow, you can say, hey, pass that same intent to your local agent instead of the whichever agent your model connected to that MCP instead of model used by your client agent, and provide additional instructions. Is this enough? Did the user ask for provide this and that? Whatever. Does it meet our company policy? And so on and so forth, right? And it doesn't even have to do the work. It can go back to the client agent and say, okay, this is now the complete information. Now you can send this to whomever you wanted to send before you started using me, right? And now that model that you were using from the start will actually give you the correct answer because MCP just augmented the context.
Is your head spinning yet? It should be. If your head's not spinning yet, you need to come on and be a guest because all of this, especially that last example that he gave, when you're putting agents behind the MCP servers, that's a whole other set of, unfortunately, what you're just recreating there is the monolith to microservice architecture yet again. That's what it is.
Depends what you put into it, but yeah. My favorite, to be honest, is MCP is a combination of code and AI, right? When I would perform some operations, let's say in Kubernetes, and say, okay, user just asked for this. Let me give you the list of resources and schemas and so on and so forth. So I'll use code to retrieve information because that's more effective than using AI for that. And then augment that context to that. Kind of like, here's everything you could ever imagine that you might need. Here are the resources, here are the schemas, here are the permissions, here is everything. I'm using some kind of dynamically generated prompts that are passed to models. And those prompts end up, sometimes I go crazy and my prompt that is not prompt what I type, but the prompt generated by that MCP sometimes would be like 100K tokens, one prompt, but with absolutely all the information you need.
So if you're not using MCP servers yet, why not? If you are using them, why? Head over to the Slack workspace, look for the podcast channel, and you should see something called Episode 321. Leave your comments there. We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.